point to start the recording. So I will be recording my screen and the audio. So ATLAS.ti is computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software, the acronym for which is CACDAS. The important word is assisted. This is computers assisting you in qualitative data analysis. They do not do it for you. So it facilitates the qualitative analysis of qualitative data. So ATLAS.ti is part of a group of software that supports analysis through data management, data exploration and visualization, data segmentation and coding, and supporting you in writing and connecting your writing to the evidence. So the writing support is really important. ATLAS.ti facilitates analyzing multiple types of research data collected through multiple methods. So if you're using semi-structured or unstructured interviews, focus groups, field notes, observations, if you're doing archival research or document analysis, photo voice or photo elicitation methods, ethnographic videos, literature reviews and synthesis. It can also work with location data. So if you're doing, for example, go-along interviews or where you're actually moving around, it can support all of these different things. So let's ask another question at this point. Do you use or have you used other software for qualitative data analysis before? So this is in addition to or as an alternative to ATLAS.ti. Again, this helps give me a picture of general experience among the group. Okay, so most of you know, so that is very useful for me to know. And another thing I'm very interested in, of course, is which area of research are you involved in? As I've said, ATLAS.ti can support multiple different approaches to qualitative analysis, but qualitative analysis, well, that's anything with text, images, etc. So it doesn't have to be academic research, but that's probably the dominant sector at the moment. There's a lot of work with public consultations, analysing market research or customer feedback, for example. Okay, so that's interesting, if I can just share that. So most of you are academic researchers, and quite a lot of you are students as well, along with some in the commercial sector. So that's quite interesting. If you would like to use the questions to post, telling me a little bit more about what you are doing, that would also be of real interest. And finally, with most of you in academic disciplines, I wonder, where are you? So I'm aware those first two are a fuzzy match, shall we say, between them. But do you generally consider yourself social sciences or arts and humanities? I think a lot of things could potentially go all of the above. Okay, so a fair mix, but mostly within social science, which is what I would often expect. And now, one of the really important questions. What sort of data are you using? Okay, so we have a fair mixture here between interview and focus group transcripts, working with documents and working with media. So I will make sure that I cover each of those areas as we go into the demonstration. Okay, thank you for participating in those polls. It's always very useful. So as I've said, it can facilitate different methods and different types of data. You're not dictated to use a particular method, and you're not dictated to approach data in a certain way, but there are very effective and good ways of approaching data in order to make it work for you. So licensing, one of the great things with ATLAS.ti is there is a free trial that is perpetual. It has limits on the number of documents and the number of codes, but they are moderately generous, so you can get a really good start, unlike many other products where it's a limited time, either 14 or 30-day license. And I'm sure we all know how much life can get away from us. We have lots of intentions to get stuff done in 30 days and then the limit is up. There are single user, multi-user and campus licenses. Working at Lancaster, I'm very lucky we have a site license. But previously, when I bought it myself, before we had a site license, under a student license, which is a substantial reduction, and you can either get student licenses for 6 months if you've just got a particular project, or for 2 years, or longer licenses as well. There are also free iPad and Android apps which allow you to start doing work on a project before bringing it into ATLAS.ti. In terms of other learning resources, there are on-demand free group webinars like this one. There are online synchronous and self-paced or asynchronous courses with a cost attached. There's face-to-face workshops that can be run or organised at your institution. There are video tutorials. There's an excellent YouTube channel. The manuals do much more than just tell you where things are. A lot of it is written by Susan Fries, and they have a lot of good methodological tips and suggestions and ideas in them. So do actually look at the manual. There is the research blog, which has quite a lot of articles and how-tos. There's the part which is put in the newsletter, so you will have the option to sign up for the newsletter. There is good information in that, good tips and tricks and ways. The user forum is very dynamic and very active, and is a great place to post problems you've encountered. It's monitored by the trainers, by the developers, and it is quite an active community. And I would really recommend the absolutely excellent book by Susan Fries on qualitative data analysis with ATLAS.ti. I was lucky I got a review copy. I was asked to review it, but it is so worth it. It really will help. It has some excellent tips and suggestions in it. Just before we get further on, I want to introduce the iPad app. I use this a lot. It is a brilliant place to put PDFs. So if you use Mendeley or you use EndNote or you use reference management software or you keep PDFs on cloud storage, you can read literature within the app and you can highlight it, you can add tags and notes and comments and annotations and then import that into your project. You can also take pictures from it or work with other data. So you can get going. But especially for literature, it's very good, and there are a couple of articles on the ATLAS.ti blog. So let's go on to have a look at ATLAS.ti. So I'm going to start at the end. This is a project. This is ATLAS.ti. If you have never seen it before, then down the left-hand side here, you have a series of buttons to do zoom in and out, to work with data. Along the top, you have your menus and other buttons there. So you have your main menus here. There are 4 key things in a ATLAS.ti project. There are documents, primary documents, quotations, which is bits of a document that you have selected, codes, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of working with qualitative data or working with this sort of software, and memos. And we'll be looking at each of these in course. So on screen you have here, this is one of the features of ATLAS.ti. On the left-hand side I have a transcript. It's a particularly detailed transcript. ATLAS.ti can cope and work with lots of different transcription conventions, whereas a lot of other software is far more restrictive in how transcripts have to be formatted. As I click down this, you can see that the video on the right changes, because you can synchronize the transcript with the audio or the video. So this opens up a lot of analytic possibilities. As I look down this transcript on the left, I can see that we have Johnny saying, I don't know if that's a world-class example of the style. That's, I mean, Brett saying, I know, that's the other thing, that's the top. And what they're saying, that's top 5. So there's a reference here to something else. They are looking at a form. This is two people they're actually judging peer. They're looking at a form and they are making reference to that form. And here in the margin, I have selected that bit of text. I have added a code to say who is speaking. I have added another code about what is being done based on my theoretical frame. But I've also created a link. So that as I read this transcript, I can say this refers to something else, click to visit, and it will open the document that is referred to, which I can then zoom in on. So they are specifically referring in this conversation to this part of this document. And that ability to link things together is really, really powerful. And ATLAS.ti has some very unique features with this. Another one is the ability to visualize that. So I can open that segment and see that it refers to another part of my project, and it has been coded with two codes. And you can start to build up series of network views in order to explore and consider relationships between different parts of your project. And I have sometimes introduced this as my thesis in a nutshell, where I was creating relationships between a code here which was related to the literature, to another code derived from the literature, to a code that collected together a series of ways of exploring, and then I could see relationships between these and start looking at the different relationships. And I could also use some of these relationships in queries. So I could then run a search to say, I want to see all the things that I have said are related to this. Finally, there are memos, and memos are really important. So here is a memo where I have taken my research question. I have written about my research question. I have then thought about which codes relate to that research question. I've written out how I might run a query. I've started thinking about it more and written some more things out. But one of the great things I can do with this sort of memo is I just have to go to the memo manager. I can say output selected memo with quotations, because I have attached that memo, that kind of initial thinking and writing, to specific good examples of data. So I can say output it, and it will include actual data from my project, selected quotations, selected parts of the project that relate to that. And this is the really powerful ability to do some of your writing for your project, for your report, whatever it is that you're going to be reporting, and connect that keep that thinking together, document what you're doing, and connect that thinking and that writing to examples and evidence that support the conclusions you want to reach. Okay, so those are some of the things that you can do. I mean, another point here, this was an ethnographic project for over a year. There are 700 documents there. I could not have managed that project without something like ATLAS.ti, but I could also organize those, so I could go and say, I just want to see my transcripts, I just want to see my field notes, I just want to see the Twitter data. But alternatively, I could say I want to see all of the data to do with a particular class or a particular event, and it would allow me to put a mixture of data together. So you can group your data in different ways and filter it, and then use those filters to help you manage and find your data and also work with queries. So this is what ATLAS.ti can do. It can provide a huge amount of support to connect things together, make connections, document those relationships, write about them, and connect that writing to the data. So if that's the end, how do we get there? Well, you start by creating a thing called a hermeneutic unit. This terminology will be changing with the next version, and it will just be called a project. But here we go. Here is a blank project. Into this project, I am going to bring some documents. So I can open the primary documents menu, and I can say, I want to add documents. As with lots of programs like this, there are lots of possible ways of bringing documents in. I'm just going to show you one way. The manual will give you other approaches to doing this. So I have got data organized in advance. So one of the things I talk about is that it is important to prepare documents before they come in. So I have organized my documents into folders based on whether they're documents, interviews, media, or my project documents. If I go into each of these, I have also done an extensive file name. Now for my project, it is important to know when it was created. So I use a date at the beginning. I can tell that this is from the 9th of June 2015, interview 3 with Maria H. It's an image, it's figure 3X, and there's a description. So it is worth naming and organizing your documents in advance. It will just help you. You don't have to, but it will help. So I am going to bring in, first of all, my project document. This is my project outline. This was what was submitted to my Research Ethics Committee. And it's a great document to have in your project. What am I going to do? What have I told people I'm going to do? What are my research questions? All of these things are useful to have in there. I'm also going to add some data. So I'm going to add one of my interviews. So you can see that has now been added. And as well as that, I'm going to add, so I could add a whole bunch of documents all at the same time, but I'm going to add one at a time for the purposes of demonstration. So I'm also going to add a video file and here we go. I have now got those three things. If I double click the interview, it will open up on screen. It will open up full screen, and bear with me, I just want to organise this so it's off my screen. There we go. Open up full screen and I can have a look at it. Now, one of the things that is missing in this view is the margin area. So I have said I can choose how do I want to do view. Under the view menu, unsurprisingly, I can say I would like to view the margin area. This is one of the metaphors that works within ATLAS.ti. You have a document here, and over here to the right of it you have a margin. And in that margin is where a lot of things will get written. So your notes will be written there. I can select some text here, and I could create what is called a quotation. So I have selected that bit of text there, created a quotation, and it adds a little mark in the margin. And I can make a note about this. So that one just says interviewer Stephen Wright, but I might want to remind myself that all interviews were conducted by SW. So what I have done there is I have selected a bit of text, created a quotation. If you double click that thing, you can now see it's had the little, it's like the corner has been folded down of the page. And I have now got an annotation. So I could go through every single line of this, select this line here and say, right, that's Steve talking. So I could right click and say create free quotation, and then do the second for the next line, the next line, and the next line, and the next line. But this is one of the things that computers are very good at, is finding regular patterns in text and doing something with that. So if you have a well-formatted transcript that has got regular features, I can say I would like to auto-code this. I want to code who is speaking. So I'm going to go to Codes, Coding, Auto-coding. And here is a little dialog box. It says enter the search expression. What do I want it to look for? I want it to find SW. I want it to be case sensitive because that's always in capitals. I only want it to look within the current document. Now it is followed by a single hard return. So there's one return character. I can tell this because I've got my line numbering showing. Sometimes you might have two returns, in which case you would say there are multiple hard returns. And I am going to say, right, SW, I want this to be coded for a person who is the interviewer, who is SW. So I could write that out. I could just say, but there is this idea that you start using kind of shortenings with your codes. You will get a feel for this the more you read. There's some excellent advice in Susan Fries's book. So if we think about person, interviewer, SW, that's what I want it to say for each time it is SW speaking. There's a button here to say confirm always. Tick it. Then you click Start. It will show you highlighted the text, and you can say code it or skip it. So I'm going to say yes, code it. And what you will now see has appeared in the margin is another grey marker showing that that text has been, a quotation has been created, and it has been added, a code added, and that code identifies who is speaking. I will say code it again for the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Once I'm confident about this, I can take confirm always off and say code it. And what that has done is it has now coded the whole interview for who is speaking, the transcript. That's great. Now for the other person. So it's Alb is the text, A-L-B for Alberto. I want to say a new person. This is a participant, or P for person, participant, and this is Alberto. So I'm going to say OK. I'm going to put confirm always back on. I'm going to press start, and it's going to say Alb. So can you hear me? Code it, code it, code it, code it, code it, code it. Yeah, I'm confident that's OK. Done. What this has now done is we have taken an interview and we have started to add data to it. So each of these grey marks shows the beginning and end of a quotation, and I have added one code to that quotation. That code tells me who is speaking. Okay, just going to have a look down it. Now what we see here is there's an extended piece of text, but this has only coded the first bit because then there is a line break. So I can now, but it's easy to change this. I select that quotation. I then select what it should cover, and there is a button here on the left to say revise the quotation size. Click that and it has now revised the quotation. This one, actually that's okay because look, there's a pause, so it's nobody speaking. This one, there is then a gap, so that gap needs to be plugged. So I revise the quotation size. Again here, select the quotation, check where it stops and that it's too short, select what it should be, click revise. This one, nope, that's not a person speaking, it's a note about what is happening. Whereas this one, again, I just need to revise that quotation. So again, select what it should be, revise quotation size. Here we go, telephone interruption, that's fine. And so I'm just going to try and make sure that, here we go, there's a final one. And that should be the entire interview now coded at a very, very initial level for who is speaking. So this would be regarded as a case code. That is a code for one of the people in my thing that I will want to compare with others. So that's great. I have started out with very little information and now I can do quite a lot. What I can do next is to read through this and double click on this quotation mark and make a note. Read through and reflect on it. I don't want to jump too quickly into coding. I want to be thinking a bit here. So what we're seeing here is some challenges to establishing communication. Now, if you're face-to-face with somebody, hopefully you're not having all of these problems. But one of the things that I really notice in this interview is just how much of these early discussions are about, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yeah, I think so. Hang on, I'm not sure, etc., 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 etc. And actually, all of this stuff is about trying to establish communication. So I might want to select all of that text and say this is a different level. Here we go. This is all establishing communication. So I've selected across a whole set of areas and created a new quotation, and I might want to just help section this up a bit. Then I ask a question, so it's me interviewing, and I'll have a quick look. So that is quite an extended discussion about this first question. This is what often happens in a semi-structured interview. It's not like you have a question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. You explore the ideas. Coming back to your question. Right. So I could say all of this, I'm going to create a free quotation again and say all of this is about research question 1. Save that comment. So again, I'm going through and starting to work out which bits of interview are about what and who is speaking. So I'm working at that level. I'm not interpreting yet. That will come later. But I just want to organize my data. As well as this, I might want to look through, and when I find something as I read through the interview that I think is particularly interesting, make an annotation about it, make a note about it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. You know, interesting how Alberto refers to anonymity and its limits here. Yeah, real concern for rec. So this might just be notes to myself as I work through it. If I find that I'm making the same sort of notes all the time about the same thing, I might start thinking, I want to collect that together. This is a code, isn't it? I want to collect these things that are all the same together. So here, he's talking about ANT, that's actor network theory, not the insect. So I might want to say, actually, you know what? This is important. I want to just be able to find later every time that the person is making reference to the theory of actor network theory. So he's talking about ANT here. So again, I can select that, right-click coding and say I want to use the last code. So there's a lot of ways of adding codes. But this is, again, it's just starting to work at this initial level of what's being said and so on. Other things that you might want to do at this stage is to think about how is it being spoken about. Is there any emotion? Are they upset? Are they happy? Are they sad? But that's very hard from a transcript. So this is where it can be really powerful to connect it with the audio. So I'll just do that again. On the right hand side there is a plus button. If you press the plus button, another window opens up and you can open another document in that window. And this will open the video that accompanies this. Now, you can work with the video directly, and you can also connect the two together. So I'm going to say for this, I would like to, it's called an associated document. I would like to associate the transcript on the left with the primary document on the right. So I go documents, associate with PD from region, and it now creates a link between them. What I can do then is go to the very beginning, make sure it's at the very beginning, and I can just press the button F8, and it will it creates a link. I can then move through this video. So if I send you a request, so that was me saying, if I send you a request, I can search for that text in the transcript. Say, if I send you a request, and I can put another link in afterwards, and that puts another red dot and it shows there's an association. We can jump ahead a bit more. Play the audio. I'm not sure if you can hear it. So I'm going to make you a tracing of the path that I followed. Path I followed. Oh. So he said followed. The path that I followed. I can put another anchor in there. And I can work through. And some is people who are using a mixture of a sort of mixture of and what I'm doing here is essentially creating a whole series of links between the two. So I'm going to go all the way to the end. All the way to the end there and create a link. What I can then do, so I can do this either regularly or for each utterance or each paragraph and just sort of work through. But then it makes it quite easy to say, documents, associated documents, I would like these to be synchronized, and ATLAS.ti will work out roughly, so the more synchronization points you have, the more accurate this is, that if I press play now, request, and if I click and it will actually play the associated audio with the transcript. Now this becomes quite important in this interview because later on in the interview he shares a diagram. And actually I'm really interested in how the text here and the speech relates to what is happening on screen. So there's a really compelling need for my research question and my analysis to look at the association between what is spoken about here and what is happening here. For another area, you may just have audio, but it could be really important to go through and read and be able to listen and notice the difference between the emotional response. You might then want to code for that. So you could listen to the audio, read the transcript, and as you go, you would add a code saying something like emotion happy or emotion upset. These are the things that don't come out in transcripts. Somebody going, it's fine, or it's fine, or it's fine. They all say it's fine, but actually the interpretation can be quite different. So that's another way of working through the coding. So what you can do with a transcript is you can automatically code who is speaking. You can read it through and annotate it. You can create quotations related to what bit of transcript is this talking about. You can connect that transcript with the audio or the video and see the two together and you can also use that to correct. So as you listen to the transcript and you spot it's wrong here, you can simply click up the top here to say I would like to edit it, and I can say actually he says the sound is absolutely he actually says fantastic. So I can edit and correct the transcripts. You obviously want to do a lot of the work initially. But this is So you can do lots and lots of work with transcripts. So that's looking at ways of working here and ways of starting to build up some initial codes. So I might want to create a code here. Remember we had this one here for question 1. So I might want to say, okay, I want to code that to remind myself that this is research question 1. But there are other ways of working with this. So what I'm going to do now is close down the transcript and open up that other document that I brought in. So this is my research ethics application, which mentions summary literature review. A lot of you would have done something like this for kicking off a project. Your research questions. Here are my research questions, and this is a great place to use one of the tools for creating a code. So I can select some text, I can right-click it, and I could say I want to actually use the text there to create a code. It will be called Code in Vivo. And it has created a quotation, you can see the line, it has created a code, and the code is how do researchers studying, and it's taken a slightly truncated version of that text to create the code. So here's the next one, what influences choice of software, Code in Vivo. Again, Code in Vivo. Oh. Code in Vivo. And again. And again. So, I have started using the text here. What I might want to do as well is to copy that text. So I'm going to mouse over it, select it, right click and say copy. I can then see the code here. If I double click the code, it gives me the option to edit it and add a comment. Or I could go to the code manager. What we can see here is that I'm starting to build up some codes. But the list is not very well ordered at the moment. So what I want to do now is to start organizing these codes so they have a meaningful name and a meaningful relationship and are ordered meaningfully. So how are breakdowns and workarounds? So at the top here is the list of codes. On the left, currently blank, is my groups of codes, and below it is a space here for a comment about what this code is and what it does. I'm going to paste the full text there. I'm going to remind myself this is a research question. Research question 1, 2, 3. Research question sub question 5, I suppose. And what I might want to do here is to rename this. So I'm going to say it's RQ5. There we go. Research question, what influences choice of software? This is a research question. I will want this to sit next to the other research question, so I will name it RQ1. I should be able to select the text, paste it in the comment, and I might want to add some further notes about this. I'm going to do research question 2. Which tools and options? So I'm going to prefix that RQ2. This is my main research question here, so I will again select all of it. How do researchers, so I'm just going to say this is RQ. RQ0, I suppose, it's the main one. Paste that there. And do the same thing for which tools. That's 1, that's 2, that's 0. How is the use of software? Copy. Sorry. Click on it, change the name, and paste a comment. Now, at the moment, that hasn't done much. But if I click name, or press F5 to refresh the list, you now see that this has got a much clearer list of the codes. So I've got RQ1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'm missing 4. How to researchers, how is the use of software accounted for? Breakdowns, use is 4. So private, public. I'm missing 3. That's why. What I did here was I accidentally used a code twice. This does happen. But so that's 0, 1, 2, that's not 4. So I can say I got that wrong. I'm going to right click it and unlink that code. And instead I'm going to select that and say code in vivo. And if I go back to the code manager, I will now see that that new code is added, and I can name it properly. RQ3. Copy the text, paste it into the comments. So what this has done is it has started to actually create, even with a few codes, a better organized list. I might even want to create, and this is a tip that Suze Fries gives, a heading. So I'm going to put it in capitals, and it just means that when I look down my list, it says research questions. Here's the codes for my research questions. I might want to create one here saying P participants. And now, now that sits above the participants. I might create one called emotions. And these organize alphabetically, so I need to just say emotion. I can then add a note about what this is, and I can add a description for each one. You should always describe your codes. It's really, really important. But this is a way of working with a document. The other thing you can do in a PDF like this is I can draw around an area of a PDF and create a quotation or a code. So I can also code like this and say add a comment if I need to, or code this as well. What this does as you build up like this is that you get a well-ordered and well-structured set of codes, you code your text, and it's a way of collecting things together. Now, finally I will show you, I'm going to add an image. Media, no, documents, image. Here's an image I can zoom in, I can draw around a bit of an image, create a quotation, and then I can code this or also annotate it. So I might want to create a free quotation there and just make a note in it of, well, what's in the text in the picture. And I can choose on the picture if I would like to see display comments, so I can actually see the comments that are there. So coding images is very, very easy. You can also code directly onto audio or video. So one possibility for me is, yes, I want to code the transcript specifically, but if I wanted to just work directly with a video, I could make a selection of a section of video, create a quotation, and either create a summary of what is spoken about, so that could be a kind of partial transcript. Or I can also code directly onto video and audio. So what coding and commenting on quotations allows you to keep notes about what you're looking at very close to the data. And coding allows you to collect those insights together. If we now jump ahead, we'll go and have a look at this project a bit later on. So, we have still got Alberto associated with the video. We've also got that picture from Maria. And this is where all of these documents here have now been organized. So I can say that the two interviews with Alberto relate to Alberto, so I created a family. The interview with RG is then associated with a family for RG. So I can go and look at all the documents to do with a person, or I can go and look at, I want to see all the audio, I want to see all the data, I want to see all the literature. I'll come on to literature in a second. So this is a way of then organizing, once you've got documents, you can select a series of documents, control click, right click and say, I would like to add these into a family or a group. It allows you to manage it and also to do things with queries. So, using the processes I've already showed you, I have created a set of codes here. And I have named these. So we have still got the research question 1, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E. We have then got what I'm calling my case codes. So this is where instead of having the P at the beginning, I've used a cent symbol. So you've got SW, the interviewer, Alberto, the participants. Then we've got a series of codes. Many of these came from reading literature and importing literature from the iPad. You can see that I have named them. So I have a capital in capitals about software. Then these are all codes to do with software. And you kind of name in reversed order. The highest level category, software, looking at CACDAS software in particular, and then looking at ATLAS.ti. Looking at other software like that. Or here I've got theorists and theory. So every time that Bourdieu is mentioned or Ingold is mentioned or somebody is writing about a theorist in literature, I have coded for that. I can double click a code and go and see it. And one of the things that's useful here is this is the idea of integrating your literature in with your data. So I read a PDF, I selected a set of text and I said, right, this is talking about methods, it's talking about research processes, but it's also talking about John Law, the theorist. I could go and see every time that Latour is mentioned. I've also used a couple of other codes. Some of them start with a star. Interesting. I love that code. Good quote. I like that code. So this is where I have read through something and I have thought, ooh, that's a good quote. So codes can be quite reflective as well. So having used those earlier methods, I've coded some PDFs. And one of the really important codes for my PDFs was this idea of my project, a continuity with my project. What have I found in the literature that relates to my project? And I can then start running some queries. So I could say, I want to see all of the things that relate to my project, all of the continuities with my project, but I also want to see the things that I thought were a good quote. So I can say, find where I have used the code good quote and where I have used the code my project continuities. And on the left here I've got a series of operators, but I'll just use them, the sort of general one, where these two occur together. I'm really hoping they will. Ooh, that's triggered an error message. Okay. So what I'm finding here is here are things. There are now 37 places where something about my project and a good quote. So I'm going to output those and go and have a look. So this is the query tool. I use the codes that I have from the left. I add them together in the right, and then I say how the two relate, and I can output it. So here we go. I created those codes, and here are a series of cases where I have said something relates to my project and I think it's a good quote, it's pithy or it's useful. And these are all things that I might want to put in an opening chapter in order to, I'll come on to memos in a second. So as I read through this, I might want to start going, oh yeah, that's a really good one. That one there, number 23. So I might want to make some connections and use these later. Now, memos. Memos are places where you write. There is sometimes confusion about memos. You can connect a memo to a piece of text. But a general guide I would suggest is a quotation comment. So this is where you select some text and you make a comment about it in the side. That's good for kind of notes in the margin, so maybe up to a paragraph, but no longer. So here I am, how technology interpose data with research processes. I've said, I like the idea of data as a relational effect, core STS idea. I've made a note, the equivalent of, writing a note in the margin about that text. But if I want to start thinking about things more at a more extended sense, I might want to create a memo. Now there are a couple of memos that I would really recommend. One is that you have a project diary. So you create a memo, you go to the memo manager, you create a new memo. One should be called project diary. You can then press Control D, it will put a date and timestamp in, and you write in what I did, what I thought, what I need to do next. And this will help you, write up, well, what have I done today? I've added documents, created codes. But the important things are actually, what did I think about? Well, interesting to see challenges of establishing communication. What codes did I do? And what do I want to do next? So that's a project diary. Another memo for your research questions is a good idea. But you can then create, for example, a research questions memo where you would put your research question and you would write about how is it developing, how is it changing, how do your research questions change? Can we see if I still got one? Yep. So this is research question. As I look at the data, this question isn't very productive. However, actually, there is limited expression of this. So I could start writing about this. I could start talking about this particular research question. So I'd have an extended bit of writing about that research question. But one of the things is, as I look through, for example, one of my interviews, now I happen to know, it comes up in this. In this segment here, Jonathan is talking about this particular research question. So I better rename that research question 3, public accounts. And I might want to say, yeah, this example here, I've looked at it, I've coded it. That's really, really relevant. So I'm going to take this research question and I'm going to drag it, I'm going to attach it to that quotation. You can now see it's got this research question there. In another interview, again, I've read through it, and this bit here also relates to that. It's a really good example. So one of the options is, this is just an emerging piece of text, but I would then have this option to say right-click, output, selected memo with quotations, and it will output that text of the memo along with the example quotes that illustrate it. So you can probably see or think through how writing in memos becomes a very useful place to kind of draft a chapter, explore something or consider it at length, and then connect that writing to examples in order to output those. Now, as always happens, we are overrunning. What I hope this has done, are memos displayed in the network view? They can be, yes. So you can create network views. There are always network views available. So if I right-click that quotation where I have attached the memo, I can right-click it and say open the network view, and it starts to show that it is related to this, and I can then say display the memo, and it will show the output of the memo there. So you can, and there are some other ways to show more about it, but that's a memo shown in a network view, that's a code, this is the quotation. And you can adjust the views within this. Then you might want to say, I would like to import other apart, so that's another bit that's coded together. And I might want to start adding some other bits to this network view to start creating relationships between them. So yes, so memos can be displayed on network views, and I'll have to look into how, but as far as I know, you can display the a more extended version of the memo, but otherwise you'd just be able to take the text and put it in. I haven't really explored network views, and I haven't really explored hyperlinking. One of the challenges of ATLAS.ti is it is a big program and it does a lot of things. So I think the final thing I will show, because I think it is so important, so unique for ATLAS.ti, is this ability to create relationships. So we've got a quotation here, we've got a quotation here, and you can attach codes. But one of the things that you might find if you have a focus group, or you have people referring to other things, or somebody saying, oh, he said that, you can click on a quotation, click and hold, and then release it over another quotation and create a relationship. And this will say this contradicts. You can create new relationships, but this refers to, or this argues with, this disagrees, this and so on. And again, that link is then created. You will see it there. So this one here relates to this. I'm going to just quickly add another code, just called example. If I run a query so I just created that really quick code just called example. If I output that, it shows not only the text, but it also retrieves stuff that has been linked. So creating links between quotations, so creating a link between a bit of text or a bit of an image with another bit of text or another bit of an image, can be visualized like this. So it's saying, oh yeah, look, there's a reference. It can be retrieved in queries, and it can do a lot more work from that. So that's one of the really powerful things, and it is unique, the ability to create these multiple different types of relationship links within ATLAS.ti. There isn't another package that does it. I hope this has been useful. I hope that this has given you a good introduction to ATLAS.ti and some ideas for getting started, and some of the things it can do and some of the ways of getting there. You're familiar with other sources of support. Are there any questions before we finish?